Hello everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Today we have with us Mr. Aditya Sehgal. Uh, he is a IIM Calcutta pass out, and he spent 27 years in Reckitt. Yeah, and he left the company as the CEO of the company. And for the past couple of years, he has been working on his own startup, which is Asgard.world, and we'll ask him more about it later. So thank you for joining us, sir. Thanks for doing this. It is going to be a great opportunity for us and for all the students. Thank you.
Thanks, Arman. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
So 10,010 days at Reckitt, it's a great accomplishment, and not only at Reckitt, at any other company, not many people are able to do it. So what was special at Reckitt, and your experience there that you were able to do this, and were there any opportunities along the way to actually move to any other company, or it was just a constant flow to do it?
I think opportunities are always there to move at any point of time. And I would credit the 10,000 days or 27 years to a lot to the company, because I mean, I've been very fortunate. So I would credit it to the company, and I would credit it to luck as well, because I was lucky enough to join at a time when the company went through a dramatic period of growth, where the company was looking for talent in various parts of the world, where every 2 or 3 or 4 years, sometimes every year also, if you did well at what you were doing, there was need for people who actually had proven themselves. So it looks like 27 years, but actually it was maybe 15 stints. And each of the stints was very different from the previous stint. So in a sense, it was, and the differences could be in countries. So I've lived and worked in many countries. It could be a function, it could be job, it could be role. So when within the same company, you can move to a different country or a different department or a different function, it's almost like moving to a different company in some ways. But the benefit of course, being in the same company is that you understand the culture. You hopefully fit the culture well. You can also be part of the group of people that is actually spreading the desired culture around the company. That's very positive. So, of course, there are always opportunities to change. But I think if you are fortunate enough to enjoy what you do and really be supported through a long career journey, there isn't really any reason to change. Money is you can always get more money by going somewhere else in the short term. But actually, one of the things that every young person should know should be the power of compounding. So lots of my colleagues and batchmates who left and were making 50, 60% more than me because of a current jump actually missed out on that career trajectory, because they kept jumping in a sense and never managed to build enough experience for the company to trust them with large enough roles eventually. And in the end, what from a money point of view, what you make in the last 1 year is more than you may have made in the first 20, right? So it doesn't matter if you had made 20% more or 30% more to begin with, but in the long term, all of these things equalize. So that's not really what makes the difference, I think.
Yeah, sir. Totally agree with you there. So you started as a management trainee in sales, right? And a lot of your career was in sales and marketing only. So my question is that basically nowadays what I see among my batchmates is that many students who want to go into marketing, they want to start out as brand managers and go to advertising, and they don't want to do the hardcore sales part that companies do come with. So is there any advice to them that you want to give about the importance of sales?
Look, I don't think it's about sales or marketing. I think you just want to put yourself in situations that are physically and personally uncomfortable for you, because it is when you are most uncomfortable that you learn the most. So, and it's also when you're doing new things that are totally you haven't done before. You are that's when you learn the most. So, for example, if you think about if you're a regular flyer, when you go into an airport, you don't think at all about anything. You know how to go through customs. You can walk through, right, and you can be on your phone. But the first time you took a plane by yourself, you were learning, right? Your eyes were wide open. You had to decide where to go next. You were listening to every piece of stimulus. You were reading everything, right? And it doesn't matter whether it's sales or marketing, as long as you have that open-eyed attitude and you try and put yourself in new situations so you learn more and more, I think it equalizes. The same people who don't want to do sales, however, are happy to go into startups where really there are no marketing jobs. Those jobs, they may be called marketing, but they're all hustling jobs, which are, in a sense, very much sales or sales-like. So just because something has been branded as not sexy anymore does not mean that that's the wrong thing for you. And eventually, for each of us, some people take a career track which starts with marketing, some people take a career track that starts in sales. The point is you have to build enough life experience to know how real people work in the real world. You can do that in marketing also, but you have to make a very special effort on top to really keep yourself grounded and not be flown away in this high-flying world of big ideas and big words which don't mean anything. So how you keep yourself grounded if you're a marketer, how you really observe how real people actually think and decide, also makes you a successful marketer or not. So if you think about people from in advertising agencies, legends who really build those insights are all human insights that come from a human connection. But you can't have human connection unless you're at the same level as the people you're talking to. Sales helps you build that. But if you start with marketing, you can still build it. You have to be very mindful of building it.
All right, sir. So I think we can come to China now. You were a marketing head in China or you were there for 7 to 8 years. So what was the basic difference between India and China that you saw then? And do you think that there is a change in that compared to 2008, 2009 to now in 2023, in the last 15 years?
So I've written a long article on this on LinkedIn. So basically, when I went to China, it was 2008, and it was about 15. China liberalized in 1979, right? So basically, when I went there, it was about 25 years after their liberalization, right? And at that point of time, China was a $3.75-4 trillion economy. Today, China is, I forget the exact number, but let's call it 18-19 trillion dollar economy, right? So I was part of, so everything grows on an S curve. And if as a student, I don't think this is taught enough, but everything grows on an S curve, and therefore everything can be modeled. So now if you think about the starting of China's S curve of growth as the point at which they liberalized, and you think of India starting of the S curve at the point at which we liberalized in 1992 or whatever it was. Now you add 25 years to that, and you're broadly where we are today. So the India of today feels very much like the China of 2008. The same sense of youth, same sense of dynamism, same sense of positivity, and the economy is about 3.5 trillion. And if you put the trajectory on top of each other from the point of liberalization, the curves completely intersect so far. So now if you project India forward for the next 20 years, India has the opportunity to do something like what China did. Of course, it'll do it in its own Indian way, hopefully a better way, a different way. But there is a real possibility that India could also be maybe not a $20 trillion economy in the next 15 years, but maybe a 12, 14, 15, $16 trillion economy, which still would mean a 3x, 4x, 5x, 6x growth. So for India, that growth period is ahead, provided it does the right things now. And the right things are invest in infrastructure, invest in the youth, invest in education, try and find areas that India can produce exports in massive quantity. So part of that has to be manufacturing, but in India, that's very small. So if it is services, then how can India create the next wave of services and brands and consumer products also maybe that can have markets around the world? For China to go from 3 million to 3 trillion to 19 trillion, it required somebody to buy their output. And the output has been in such high quantity that everywhere in the world you have made in China. So in the next 15 years, unless everywhere in the world for some industry or some field, lots of the output is made in India, India will struggle to get to that level. So India has to find that and make sure that we don't waste our demographic dividend.
Okay, sir. So in terms of your job, was there any significant differences between the type of distribution or the type of marketing models that you had to follow? So was there a learning curve, let's say, when you had to go to China?
Sure. So when I went to China, at that point of time, I was very much steeped in the sales and distribution model that came from the West and also in India. And it was very TV driven at that point of time. So my company, Reckitt, even now it's the second biggest advertiser in India. It's a top 8 advertiser, top 10 advertiser in the world, even though it's not that large a company. It's not in the top 10 of companies, right? So what's happened is that the company's model was always to rely on a lot of advertising in premium categories, which had high margin. And because of that, those categories would grow fast. Now, this model did not work in China at the time I went there because Chinese advertising was just too expensive. So we were very lucky because way back in 2009, 10, 11, we shifted to a totally online and digital model. And actually, a lot of the kind of advertise or communication that you see today, which is either focused on some kind of social media marketing or some kind of performance marketing, is what we shifted to way back in 2009, 2010. And for brands like Durex, basically, we had over a decade of very interesting social media activation. So actually, there's a Harvard Business Review case study on Durex marketing practices in China from that period, which, and of course, this wasn't something that was common at that point of time. So in a sense, we almost had to invent it as we went along. So now all of these things are getting a bit more common. The kind of advertising and support and digital marketing and performance marketing that you do in India today is very much like what we were doing 15 years ago, 10 years ago in China.
All right. So I think I'll come to your startup now. First of all, the decision to leave at a CEO level, the global CEO level, to move to a startup. What was the reasons behind the decision? And what is your
Well,
startup about? You could introduce yourself.
sure. So the reason so first of all, I just to correct that, I didn't leave when I was COO. So after I was COO, I became president of the company. So I left at that point. Why did I leave? Well, it was mostly personal. So I've always been very clear that there are various phases in life, and there are things that are right and appropriate for each phase. So I was turning 50, and I had a very nice, very lucky career in corporate. As a family, we haven't changed so much from the normal people we were when we left India. So we are not the kind of people who need to buy, expensive yachts or Ferraris and stuff like that. So because our needs are relatively modest, it's easy to retire when you get to that kind of level, because you can choose to sit your life on a beach and incur very little cost and have a little income, and that's good enough. So I was lucky enough, in a sense, to achieve escape velocity from the corporate world, where I did not necessarily need to work to earn money to live, right? So that was the first thing. Then I guess the second thing was that this was the time which was quite important for my family. My son was going to we have only one son, he was going to go to college in a couple of years. So that gave me time. I mean, I had not had as much time with him as I would have liked, because I used to travel like a total maniac before that because of my job. So I wanted to make sure I spend time with family. I have lots of hobbies. So again, you want to best enjoy your life when you're young enough to enjoy it. So there's this joke about the old joke about Mercedes cars, right? The only people who have Mercedes cars are not young enough to enjoy them. So anyway, so the key thing was to do that. Then I always knew that knew that the next stage would be something smaller and more nimble. So I don't really necessarily want to work for these very, very, very large companies. So I'm okay to work for a smaller or mid-sized company where there is much more focus on growth, where there's much more growth opportunity, and the company is nimbler and leaner and focused on the possible. the larger companies become, the more bureaucratic and the more politicized they become, in a sense. So anyway, and I built so many small businesses within Reckitt that I knew that I know how to build small businesses. And finally, if you think about it from a financial point of view, there is always more money in business ownership than in business employment, provided the business is successful, right? So I always knew that this is something I wanted to do. I had lots of ideas for new businesses. And I spent the first year really thinking about relearning all the trends, reconnecting with what's happening in the world outside. I defined for myself what I thought the top 7-8 trends in the world are likely to be for the next decade. And I said my startup is going to be on at least 2 or 3 of these trends, so that even if I execute badly, a rising tide should solve some of those problems. And even if I execute terribly and I totally fail, which is quite possible, 90% of startups fail. Assuming it, even if it fails, the learnings I have are in fields that are so interesting and so relevant 3 or 4 years down the line, that in a sense, then the money I've invested in the startup is money I've invested in my education, because I can go back to the corporate world and this will then be totally cutting edge for the companies I join and can help them grow, right? If I decide to do that again. So it's a situation where even if you lose, you still win somehow, by being able to focus on the right thing. I always say that, for smart people, for young people, like smart young people in your school, for example, my message to them always is that you can climb every ladder that is put in front of you. Don't doubt that. Don't doubt that you will not have a good life. You will have enough money to retire well and to take care of your children. That's a given. That's 100%. Even if you fail, you will still have that. So you will climb the ladder of success. So that's not the problem. But you think that's the problem, but that's not the problem. The problem is to make sure that your ladder is climbing against the right wall. So in my case, when I started my career, my ladder was climbing against the Reckitt wall, which was a growing multinational, which was open to taking people on merit and moving them all around the world. And because I was on that ladder and I climbed it, I had that glorious career. Smarter people than me joined jobs where their company was not so open, and they stagnated at a middle management level in India, even though they did better than me, and they would have done better if they had joined Reckitt, right? So, of course, do what you do well, but the more important thing is what you do. And then the second most important thing is how well you do it. So I had the full choice to decide what I would do. So I decided to put I wrote 4 white papers with 4 different business ideas, and finally chose this one to do first. So this one is called Asgard World. It's essentially a virtual world which is built on a map-based interface. And the aim of that world and the aim of the map is to customize things so that we can create tokens representing goods or services or content or anything that people can need, and use those tokens to give to people or to make available to people so that it can satisfy all your needs. So essentially, there's an AI in the world which is trying to find goods and services which it can then represent as tokens. And the core directive of the AI is to satisfy the human needs of all the users. So in a sense, it's a world with an AI which is trying to satisfy human wishes. Now, I know this sounds a bit confusing, and let's see when it comes out how it works out.
Yes, sir, all the best for that. Sir, do you think that for us and for even, so I'm an MBA student, for even graduates, it is important to learn about AI, metaverse, tokens, cryptocurrency, everything that you talked about in your startup?
I think it's very important to learn about all the things that are going to be a significant part of your life. So I think the biggest trend, actually, by the way, is not all of these things, it's climate change. So your generation is going to be the most impacted by trying to prevent climate change. And when that fails in efforts to mitigate climate change, there's going to be trillions of dollars spent on that. And people are going to need returns, right? So that's one thing that your generation should know very well. Then the second thing is the rise of AI. not just generative AI, but today we live in a world where AIs are trying to achieve the prime directive. So for example, the Facebook AI's prime directive may be to maximize revenue. How does it do that? It knows that it gets revenue every time a human being clicks on a keyboard. So now it is going to serve up customized content to each human being so that they click more. Now it so happens that content is things that make you emotional, positive or negative. And therefore the Facebook AI is optimizing human beings to deliver a prime directive. So we live in a world where AIs are optimizing human beings as variables to deliver their prime directives. Now, the prime directive can be anything. So eventually you could have a Bombay City AI who's focusing on maximizing the utility for citizens in Bombay, but in the process, maybe some citizens may be totally screwed. So in this world, you better know about AI, or at least you know about the implications. You're going to live in a world where more and more things are going to be tokenized and traded. You're going to live in more and more virtual worlds. So it may not be Mark Zuckerberg's vision of the metaverse where everyone is wearing these dorky things, but you already live in a metaverse. We are talking to each other in a metaverse, in a sense. So how this metaverse evolves will be maybe different from how Meta is defining it, but it will certainly evolve in a way that's relevant to you as a human being, right? So you should know about it. So the changing nature of our lives with technology and after COVID, there are so many changes that have happened because of that. Your generation should absolutely be all over things like this, because it is in the intersection of these kinds of trends that the new opportunities will come, which you guys are going to make massive businesses.
Okay, sir. So I think before concluding, I would just ask your parting advice for our students, and please do tell them your mantra for happiness. I really love that.
Okay, so my advice is, I'm going to repeat it. I think it is so important. So remember, you will succeed at whatever you do. So the most important thing is to be clear about what you do and make sure that what you do is going to lead you to where you want to go. The last thing you want to do is to climb a ladder, reach a roof, and there is nothing further above that. Now it's a low roof and you're not totally bored all your life on that roof. Don't do that to yourself. Then you're looking for other roofs to jump to. So make sure that you do the right thing, and I'm sure you will do things right anyway. Right. So then the mantra for happiness is it's a very simple formula. So people think happiness is about achievement. So the more you achieve, the happier you are. But in reality, that is not so. So the formula for happiness is achievement minus expectations. So actually, there are two variables. It's not one variable. So you can increase your achievement or you can reduce your expectation. So in my case, when I retired, I reduced my expectation of how much money I need to have in my bank. And I figured out how much I need to live. Having done that, it was very easy for me to retire. But if I had not reduced my expectation, and if I had kept my expectation growing when I joined my company in 1994, my base salary was 4,500 rupees. I felt very happy with that per month. Okay. When I left my company, my salary, I won't tell you a number, but was significantly north of, let's call it $5 million. Right. So but the thing is that my last salary did not make me any happier than my first salary. And if I had projected that I need to continue to make money in that ratio going forward, then I would always be unhappy because I would never be able to achieve that. But just by saying that, listen, my requirements are such that I don't need more than X amount of money, which is a relatively modest sum. And the rest of it, it's okay, it doesn't matter. It just changes your definition of happiness. In many people in our generation, it's certainly my generation, where a lot of the parents were from, in India, were from government services and did not really have the money to afford education abroad and things like that. We became a generation, in a sense, of insecure overachievers. And it was our insecurity that kept driving us to become more and more overachievers. The problem in life happens when you lose that insecurity. Then what drives your overachievement? So maybe this is something that you will figure out or think is valuable advice in 10 or 15 years. Maybe it's not valuable advice as a student, because probably you need your insecurity to drive your overachievement at this stage. But the other thing that can drive your overachievement and happiness, rather than being insecure, is to find a goal that you aspire to that totally motivates you. If you can do that, you're running towards something rather than running away from something. Running towards something is always a happier place than running away from something. So if you want to manage your happiness, it's not about what the world gives you. It's much more about what you expect from the world. And that's the only thing that you can manage. So it's like a switch in your head. You reduce your expectation, your happiness will go up. But the person responsible for your happiness is you, not the world.
That's wonderful, sir. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for doing this, sir. It's really a great opportunity for the students of NMIMS. And whenever you're in Mumbai, we'd be glad to set up something offline where the students can directly interact with you. So please just ping me if you're ever in Mumbai. So,
Thank you very much. And in general, I'm quite open on LinkedIn. So if anybody ever wants to ask a question or chat, I'm quite happy to chat. No problem.
okay, sir. Thanks a lot for doing this, sir. Again, thank you.
Thank you, Arman. Bye.
Bye.